infra and the economy. Who better than Vinayak Chatterjee to throw some more light on that and talk about what he's making of it so far. Vinayak, great to have you on the show as always. So far in the third quarter, most of the infra companies have won major orders across verticals. Is private capex picking up, or do you think this momentum is likely to continue?
Look, to be frank with you, in the foreseeable year ahead, particularly as we ramp up towards budget time, I think public expenditure will continue to be the real growth driver. And in certain segments, private capital and private investments in infra will follow. I think the sectors where private infra will follow are obviously the traditional roads and highways sector, but there is tremendous interest and investment activity in the renewable energy space. And right now, it is not just about generating capacity, but it's about pump storage, battery installations, hydrogen, ammonia. So these will see investments. There is talk of a batch of 7 airports bundled together, each bundle consisting of one profit-making airport with one loss-making airport. So people in the airports business are looking up to have a bid basket of about 7 bundled projects. So these are the areas where private capex will come in. But the big headline story is that the country will still have to depend on large chunks of public expenditure, which actually brings me to a discussion on the expectations for the budget. But back to you.
So just on that note, Mr. Chatterjee, one of my colleagues last week broke an exclusive story saying that the government capex might be higher by about 10 to 15% this year compared to last year. Given that we're stuck in the middle of that halfway mark right now and we still have the second half to go, do you think this 10 to 15% capex target, if it comes true, is a little ambitious, or do you think it's doable?
Your question is about the allocation in the budget?
Sure. Yes.
See, now I'll explain to you. The broad macros of the infra allocation in the budget is actually very simple. The country needs to do 7% of its GDP in infra. Okay, that is now accepted across all political and economic circles. If the country has to do 7% of its GDP in infra expenditure to sustain growth levels of around 7% also, the union budget normally, as per the thumb rule, has to do half of that. So the union budget has to spend 50% of the 7% of GDP, and therefore I have the number with me. I don't want to bore your viewers with too much maths, but if you put this model together, then the expectation on the union budget allocation would be 14 lakh crores against 11 lakh crores last year. That would be my rational expectation, that once again, public expenditure will have to pummel growth, and the union budget will have to provide for 14 lakh crores against last year's 11 lakh crores. So that's a 3 lakh crore increase on 11. You can figure that out. It's much higher than your 15% increase in the union budget. Earlier, we have seen years where the budget year after year used to have an infra allocation increase of 30%. So we have to now inch closer to that figure. But this is completely a rational desire where infra once again has to take center stage. Back to you.
Vinayak, Sajid here, morning. Do you think the government has the fiscal space to go for that 14 lakh crore capital expenditure?
Look, this question always arises. The issue really is that last year we had the peculiar situation where the word infrastructure and railways did not even feature in the budget speech, right? And the country needs public expenditure to completely pummel growth and to go with the original economic thesis of the NDA when it came to power in 2014, that they're going to use public expenditure to pull the levers of growth. Having said it, creating fiscal space in the budget is a question of budget arithmetic. Now, if you want to weigh very heavily on control of fiscal deficit, obviously your space is constricted. If you want to go very heavily on certain other sectors which are non-infra, then your space is constrained. So it's about the arithmetic of the budget exercise where you create space for infrastructure. I think so that is always there. And I am one of those people who argue, and there are many, many economists who subscribe to this view, that if you are allocating a certain amount of funds for nation building, for infrastructure, then a few percentage points relaxation in the fiscal deficit is perfectly acceptable. So we should not use fiscal deficit argument as a millstone around our neck not to power the economy ahead, particularly in a situation of global uncertainty, decreasing exports because of Trump tariffs, and all the other scenarios that we have. Back to you.
Given the fact that you had a 8.2% GDP coming in, and the opinion which is coming from many economists is for a pause in rates in December, and you couple that with the kind of nominal GDP growth which is below 10%. Do you think that the government will go for that extra, expansion in fiscal?
Look, I can't say whether the government will go or will not. I can only argue the case as to why it is rational for the government to continue to use large outlays in public expenditure. It leads private capital into infrastructure. What it does is, and I have often shared with all of you on the media, that few years ago, a confidential report was shared by a very eminent finance secretary of the Times, who said that the government clearly knows that a rupee spent on infrastructure results in 3x of GDP, whereas a rupee spent on direct benefit transfers at equivalent staff results in 90 paisa of GDP growth. So, I mean, the maths is clear. You want the economy to push ahead, you need to put into public expenditure, and it goes towards a noble cause, which is nation building. So I would argue for creating the necessary space, and just because we have a quarter of GDP growth doesn't, in a sense, ensure the quarters ahead. We must use this opportunity to actually pump in more money into infrastructure. And believe me, part of it is not just a general desire. Part of it is sheer necessity. I mean, I have argued that large amounts of cash now need to be put into both the rural economy, particularly in areas like post-harvest technologies, cold chains, warehousing, mandis, and in urban infrastructure, because our cities are crumbling. So obviously we have to take care of the quality of life also. I would also argue, and this is the last point I'll make before I'll hand it back to you, is that for the last 25 years, we have now seen roads and highways as the prima donna of budgetary outlays. They get the most. Now, roads and highways has reached a certain level of sustainable maturity. And I think economically, the time is ripe for India to announce a mega policy for the next quarter century on high-speed rail. And I'm sure you don't have enough time on this program right now for me to expound on this theory. But the moot point is the country is ready for a very major push on high-speed rail. And I would love to see that emphasis in the union budget.
But just one observation, Vinayak, the fact that most EPC companies have actually lowered their revenue growth in the quarter, and there's been a margin guidance cut as well for the remaining of FY26. When do you think this will actually turn around?
So I'll tell you what, the large portion of the order books of your EPC companies whom you track is based on the roads and highways sector. And the roads and highways sector has actually had very clearly documented a certain slowdown. People have documented the slowdown from anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20%. So that is reflecting in the EPC companies. But remember, outlays on infrastructure don't necessarily mean the traditional construction EPC companies. I mean, there are outlays on people that make electrical stuff, cables, transmission towers, batteries, equipment for hydrogen, for ammonia. So there is a swath of, cold chain technologies. There is a swath of infra companies that are not necessarily your traditional EPC construction companies. So that should not be the only bellwether for you to check the health of the infrastructure industry.
Okay. On that note, Mr. Chatterjee, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for throwing some light on the state of public and private capex and where we are expected to head from here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, viewers, let's shift focus and talk about the Black Friday shopping euphoria that we've seen across the country.